Hola, it's me, Jolene, and I'm back with another video. This time I'm going to be talking about how to support your child if they are trans or non-binary or just gender non-conforming. It is something that I touched on a little bit in the last video, and I just wanted to dig a little deeper and go into more depth on how to be supportive and what, from my experience, I think would be the right and wrong ways to go about it. I've also taken down some notes of the most popular kind of advice that's being given and what I think of it and how I think it could be improved or evolved on. So I'm just gonna get straight into it. And the first thing that I took down was, don't assume your child's gender expression is a form of rebellion. I think that's a really good point. I mean, that goes for most things when it comes to dealing with children, is you don't want to assume that they're doing it to be malicious. That creates doubt in themselves, and it also makes them feel like they're in a hostile environment. But I would also add on to that that it's not always a good idea to assume that your child's gender expression is indicative of them being trans, because there are plenty of people that just enjoy things that are typically for the opposite sex, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're trans. As I said in my last video, being trans really comes down to a cognitive dissonance experience that's called gender dysphoria. So sometimes, boys wanting to play with girls' toys and girls wanting to play with boys' toys, that doesn't always mean that they're trans as well. So I think that is as equal as try not to assume that they're just trying to rebel. Also, don't assume that they're trying to show you that they are trans if it's really just coming down to those superficial things like wanting to play with toys marketed for the opposite sex. The next thing that I took down was, don't stop your child from expressing gender in public or family events. This is one I see a lot of, and in theory it's great, but in reality it's not always safe, and it's not always a good idea for the child. They don't know how to cope with every opinion that they're going to get, and unfortunately there is a huge majority of grown adults that do feel like it's appropriate or okay to express their own personal beliefs with children. So that is kind of play by the circumstance. If you know that your child's going to be in a situation where they might be around adults or other children that don't have that kind of ability to hold back on what they might be thinking, maybe not necessarily tell them not to be themselves, but take the time beforehand to explain to them that what they might be going into, and if they feel safer being more gender conforming, then it's totally okay to do that, and it doesn't mean that they're going back on who they are if it means keeping themselves safe. I definitely think that's something that is a bit more nuanced than just let your kid do whatever they want wherever they are, because as the adult you should be able to take the initiative to say, this might not be safe for you, and I'm going to give you all the tools that you need to be able to make an informed decision on how you want to go into this environment and into this situation. I think would be the best way to go with that kind of advice. The next one that I took down is, don't try to shame or punish the gender expression out of your child. I think if you're watching this video, you probably are already aware of that. You probably shouldn't be shaming children for who they are, regardless of whether it's tied to gender expression or not. But with that one, I would also say that that can be a bit more nuanced as well, in that you really shouldn't be punishing or encouraging. Encouraging creates kind of a subconscious reward system, and then that can lead down a path of people incorrectly thinking that they're trans, growing up as trans, and then realizing that they're not, and that can cause resentment for themselves and for you, and it can create its own problems as well. So trying to remain neutral with these kinds of things is the best way to go, and I think that goes across the board for all of these steps, is you really, to some degree, have to remain neutral. As I said earlier, though, if you are the parent or you're the adult, the guardian, what have you, it is up to you to be able to make the informed decisions to help them through life safely. But punishing obviously can create an adverse reaction as well as encouraging. So I would say try to do neither. Try to just be neutral. I think that's really the best way to go about it. Don't block your child's access to gender diverse friends, activities, or resources. I think that's just good advice for any child, whether they're trans or not. Is, to me personally, I don't think it makes sense to be telling your child that they shouldn't be around certain people because of how they identify. Again, this comes down to a safety thing. In certain situations, you should definitely be kind of limiting who your child is wanting to be around if you think that those people are harmful, regardless of their gender identity. But I don't think totally shutting off your child's exposure to gender diverse people is a realistic option anymore for anyone. So I mean, that I can't really speak too much to, because that really is, I think there's no way of preventing children from seeing queer people in media anymore. So I don't think that's one that will really be going too far for a lot of people, and particularly not for the people that would be watching this video. Now, the last one that I took down that I have seen a lot of is don't blame your child for experiencing discrimination. That's a very important one. I've always said that I'm very lucky to have the family that I have. I have the best family for me. I have only really experienced support from my family. I was never kind of punished or discouraged from being myself. One thing though is, when I did come out as trans and coming out as queer, like quite young and all of that, I was never explicitly punished for experiencing discrimination. However, there were a few instances where people were going out of their way to target me, and I did hear many iterations of, well, how do they know that you're gay? I even actually heard that from police officers after somebody threatened to come to my house and kill me. So that was quite confronting to experience. But I did, through that time, as well as this was a time where social media was kind of starting to pick up momentum, and I did hear many iterations of either you were asking for it, if you're looking this way, people will, it will attract negative attention. So I do, in some regard, have experience with that happening. It is really hard when you are trying to protect your child to take the time and realize that maybe there is a subliminal message that they're picking up on, whether you mean it or not. So before kind of expressing any concerns with your child about the kinds of attention they might be getting, if they do go ahead with transitioning or they're dressing in a way that's less conformative, just make sure you choose your words carefully, because I know that I was relayed information out of, fear for my safety, but the subtext that I was picking up on was, well, you're kind of asking for it, this is what happens when you live like this. And it did create some kind of emotional turmoil for me in the long run, unfortunately. And that's through no fault to anyone around me. It just really was the time and the resources that everyone had. Not everyone had kind of the grasp that we do now, which is why I'm making videos like this, so that those situations can be avoided, hopefully. And I think if you're watching this video, you're probably heading in the right direction if your child is trans, in trying to find out the right information. So if you did have any other questions about this, or wanted to know more about my experiences being trans and what it was like growing up and all of that, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you want to know. I'll try and respond to everyone and get back to every question and answer as truthfully and as transparently and informatively as I can. But I think for now that kind of covers everything that all the information that I'm capable of giving. So I think that's it for this video, and I will see you tomorrow in another one.